Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brainstation's online starting and building a career in tech event featuring cybersecurity, software engineering, and data. I'm just going to give a few moments for everyone to hop on here before we get started, but we're really excited to have you and thank you all for joining us wherever you may be attending from. I know this is a global event. I'm here in New York City, but I know we have panelists coming from Canada, US, and London. So we're really excited to have you all. Just a couple quick housekeeping items before we get started. Again, I'm Grace. I'm the manager of growth operations here at Brainstation. As you see below, you can see our social media handles. We'd love for you to offer any insights or share your experience with us today. We would love to hear from you. And then if you have any questions regarding what we kind of talk about today in regards to Brainstation, if you look at your right-hand side, you can go ahead and ask a learning advisor about our courses or boot camps or really any of the curriculum we have here today. But I'm really excited to get started here. So let's dive right in. What is Brainstation? So before we get started, a brief introduction to Brainstation for those of you who aren't familiar with us. So over the past 10 years, Brainstation has established itself as the global leader in digital skills learning and workforce transformation, with the ultimate mission of empowering businesses and professionals with the skills, they need to be successful in the digital economy. So like I said, I'm based in New York City, where we have a beautiful campus, and we have 4 other campuses across the globe, in addition to our online learning platform, which you guys are on today. And every year we're preparing our students, developing them to get them into the fastest growing jobs in technology. So we train thousands of professionals every year, and we're excited to continue doing that through our online custom platform that we're on today. So on a global scale, we're proud to showcase that we have 5 state-of-the-art campuses, a network comprised of over thousands of industry partners, which continues to expand every day. And we've trained more than 100,000 professionals to date. And we're really excited to continue that. So why are we all here? What's the agenda for today? So the purpose of our starting and building a career in tech event this morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you may be joining us from, is to explore the 3 most in-demand disciplines in technology, which today is data, software engineering, and cybersecurity. So we'll take a look into the growth and some exciting trends in those industries, and then we'll take a look at some of the most common roles available in each of these industries as well. And then we'll hear from our experts in the field. So we have guest speakers joining us today from eBay, Spotify, IBM, some really, really amazing companies, and we have some great advice that they're willing to give us. So we're excited about that. And then lastly, we'll highlight some actual next steps. So moving right on into our industry and trends. Every successful company is investing in finding creative and efficient ways to harness the power of data. So this is illustrated through the sharp increase in demand for data professionals. And we're expecting to see an increase in the demand for data professionals by 2026. So with an estimated 11.5 million jobs created, and this number is projected to grow an additional 22% by 2030, according to the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And currently in the US, there are over 1.3 million open data related jobs. So pretty incredible number, and I'm sure that's even more once we consider the global perspective. And then the demand for software engineering and software engineers and web developers is continuing to climb as well. The demand has doubled in the past year alone, making development one of the most in-demand and top-paying roles in technology. And the stats really drive this home. So with the number of open roles currently sitting at 260,000 plus, with an average salary of a software engineer in the United States averaging about $120,000. And with the increased digitization and use of mobile devices, it is now essential for organizations to understand and implement effective cybersecurity measures. So organizations around the globe are recognizing this. So according to McKinsey and Company, $150 billion was spent globally on cybersecurity in 2021. And this dollar amount has continued to grow by 12.4% annually since then. And the demand for cybersecurity professionals is projected to see massive growth. And there are over 78,000 open roles for cybersecurity engineers alone in the United States. So again, I'm sure a ton more globally. And there are expected to be 3.5 million unfilled roles across the country within the next few years as the field grows. So diving into some of those common career paths, For data, like we said, some of the most popular roles that you'll see in the data field are data analyst, data scientist, and research scientist. So the data analyst is the clean and makes sense of existing data, querying, forecasting, creating dashboards. The data science works on new ways to capture and analyze data, so data mining, creating programming techniques, and developing big data infrastructures. And then the research scientist focuses more on the academic studies, though many of the same tools and techniques would be used by these individuals as well. And the tools and skill sets, they vary slightly role to role, but there's typically lots of overlap. And some of the key tools used across these roles are Python, Excel, TensorFlow, Tableau, SAS, Anaconda, and DataRobot. In development, we have the front-end developer, the back-end developer, and the software engineer. Some of the key tools used across these roles: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Node.js, React, Agile software development, and Ruby on Rails. So front end, they focus on the front end, so the more visual aspects of a website, the things that a user sees and interacts with. And so they typically use common languages like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The back end focuses more on everything going on in the back end, essentially, everything from a website structure to its data and logic. And these programs typically include Java, Ruby, and PHP. And then software engineers are applying engineering principles to ultimately build the software, and they're responsible for the system as a whole. And their tools include Java, Ruby, and Python. So some of the most popular titles that you'll see in the cybersecurity field are cybersecurity analyst, cybersecurity engineer, and security manager. And individuals and security professionals have a wide variety of cybersecurity software and tools to help them prevent or mitigate threats. But a few of the most common tools you'll see are IP lookup, VPNs, DNS lookup, and GeoTraceroute. So that being said, let's get into why you guys are all here today. We have our panelists joining us, and we have from trends to career paths. Let's hear from the panelists, and they'll shed some light on their own individual experiences in these fields and provide advice on how you too can build your own career. So welcome, Gaurav, Zohan, and Matthew. Let me get you all up here. So we are so excited to have you all today. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here. We're so excited, like I said. And I just wanted to kind of get started. What exactly do you guys do on a day-to-day basis? What's kind of the main function of your role at this time? So let's go ahead and we'll start with you, Gaurav, because you're at the top of my screen. Tell us about your current role, where you currently work, and some of your day-to-day responsibilities.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's very, very nice to be in presence of so many good people and share some insights about what I know and what I do. I'm Gaurav, and I currently, as you can see, work as an engineering manager at Spotify. A part of my role basically involves working with software engineers and data engineers to kind of work through and understand a strategy for how we develop features and develop architectures and systems for Spotify. This is quite an intensive role, but at the same time gives you the freedom to try out so many new things, learn new stuff, and basically work across what's happening around the industry. In addition to, I'm based in London, as already Grace mentioned, and the way I work here is my role at Spotify has been a culmination of various steps that I've taken over the past 10, 12 years, which has been quite involved heavily in the field of data and data engineering and analytics, where I've worked with companies like Facebook, Home24, Spotify leading up to it, in the field of data engineering, data science, leading teams, building teams around it. So that's a bit about myself.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Matthew, moving on down to you. Can you tell us a little bit about your current role, your day-to-day responsibilities, and obviously some of your experience over at IBM?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep it fairly brief, and I'll try to include more stuff as we kind of go along here. But I'll tell you that the fun of being in the cybersecurity profession and working in like data protection is that there really is no day-to-day that you can really speak to where it's like sort of standard. Things are changing all the time. But I will highlight kind of three specific areas. One is kind of acting as sort of a product advisor. So looking at the life cycle of product development and making sure that we're thinking about security and privacy by design, and implementing that everywhere that we can. Transactional work. So as we work with different vendors and clients, looking at the different security and privacy provisions to make sure that all parties know sort of what they're responsible for, as well as making sure that we have, whatever rights to kind of audit, make sure that they're actually doing those things or what have you, and really just building trust, really with, our partners in ecosystems as well as our customers, of course. And then also sort of helping out with cybersecurity investigations. So just, helping to see if something is really a breach or not. A lot of people are very quick to get nervous when certain things are disclosed, and when there's just things that are sort of out there. So my job is to kind of come in and assess that and really determine, what the right next steps are. So that's kind of a very high level overview.
I think you just described to me. I'm always a little nervous when something doesn't seem right on my computer, in my software specifically. And then last but certainly not least, Zohan, why don't you share with us a little bit about your current role, where you currently work, and some of your day-to-day responsibilities over at eBay?
Yep. I work at eBay as a web developer, but my day-to-day role is mostly like marketing based. So I'm part of the marketing team. So they have like tons of different products that they want to test out and launch on the website, like different experience based on like different interests of different users. Like, so we have sort of like different audiences that we get on a day-to-day basis, and we need to target them, show them certain things that like not, we don't want like the whole generic audience to see. So more of like logical based, and then fixing bugs on a day-to-day basis. If there are any, and then like, yeah, we also have to change our code on a frequent basis, not every day, but maybe like every quarter, based on if there's any change to the data model. We have to make those changes on our end. Apart from that, I also help with email marketing, so work on the free marker templating language to help send out like customized emails. Like if you view an item, you get an email based on the logic that's determined. So yeah, that's a lot of technical stuff that I said. Maybe might not make sense, but like, yeah, that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. It's a fun role. Like you get to experiment new things and then discuss along with product owners. Since it's a big company, like there's like too much friction going on, like who gets to get their product launched first, but it's fun.
You may have mentioned a lot of technical jargon there, but we will dive into all of it today. I'm very excited to have you all here, and thank you. Zohan, I think my brother is currently in the midst of building out his man cave, and I think he's on eBay every single day trying to find some vintage posters. So your advertising is working on him. I tell you that.
That's good to hear.
So kind of moving into those like in-demand skills, we talk about the need for some of our industries that you guys are in. These technical skills are only increasing in demand. They're ever changing. They're always, moving, pushing forward. So giving everyone a chance to share why these disciplines are so important, I wanted to ask you the following. So let's go start with Gaurav again. As a data professional, can you dive a little bit deeper into the role that data insights play on the decision-making over at Spotify?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for any company, generally speaking, it's almost a necessity or must be a requirement to make decisions that are driven by data, right? And there are multiple ways which you can, someone working in the field of data can influence the way that you can make decisions making, right? So at a senior level, at a leadership level, where let's say senior decisions are made around what we should do, how we should do, more often than not in the past have been the case where decisions have been made by some sort of a hunch feeling or what you think based on experience. And I think ever since I've started working, that has come down. And that's thanks to the role of evolution of the role of data analyst, data scientist, to say so, right? So in any business, any industry, it's important and imperative that we make decisions based on insights. And we now have, thanks to the amount of information that we generate in the world, in the tech sector or in e-commerce or digital world, is just impossible to not ask questions like, do we have data around it or not, right? So wherever you feel like you need to make a decision, in some way or other, you will have an information available to you to process that and make a decision that is backed by data. It's a matter of how do you use it. It's a matter of how do you work on it. And that's where the role of an insights team or a data team member becomes and comes into play. So as a data person, you hold insane amount of responsibility and insane amount of power to influence those kind of decision making at a very senior level as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And heading back over to you, Zohan, the need for technical skills permeate across all industries, but especially within software engineering. So why is your role so important to a company like eBay?
So yeah, it drives business, like because we want to show a customer that's interested in basically a particular product and not everything. Like if you're into construction, we don't want you to, see socks or fashion accessories. Like if that's your enthusiasm about different stuff. So like eBay is most of based on like collector based, like sneakers and vintage items. Like so based off of interest, like we want to show certain uses. And again, like that's where like I guess data comes in. Like we get a bunch of different data, but then how to, render it and how to show it to the audience is what I do in short.
Amazing. And Matthew, I think, like you kind of mentioned already, cybersecurity it's a fast growing industry because it's so necessary. And with digital security having such broad implications across quite literally everything we do as well, it's super exciting to have you here to share some of those insights. Can you help us understand the importance of cybersecurity today at a company like IBM and beyond that, I guess, even if in a more general sense as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the importance is stressed just from like picking up a newspaper, right? Like I think a lot of people at this stage in the game, you really can't take it for granted. I think maybe decades ago when the economy was a little bit less digital, you would hear a little bit less about cybersecurity. Maybe cybersecurity was just a group of people in a basement that you didn't really hear from. And I think people are much more surprised to see the influence that cybersecurity has on things like business strategy overall, because a lot of what we're doing, and I think Gaurav touched on it really effectively. A lot of what we're doing is centered on data and insights from data. And we really want to think about, well, where is that data being generated from? And how sensitive is that data? And what are we doing to protect it? And if we don't protect it sufficiently and it gets out there, who is accountable and how do we sort of like mitigate that effectively? And that's such a fun game of cat and mouse, especially now, with artificial intelligence in the game, just making everything a lot faster than it already has been, and really thinking about those questions. So I think when we're thinking about user safety, when we're thinking about ethics, when we're thinking about doing the right thing, and also, mitigating fines and penalties, cybersecurity is massive, right? And so I think it's also very divided in terms of roles that you can do. So, in terms of like technical proficiency, I obviously am nowhere near Gaurav and Zohan, but I'm still contributing in the capacity that I can. And I think that that's because there's so much space for people to kind of like enter into cybersecurity in those different capacities. But yeah, I don't want to go like too off topic there. But if there's any follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, there are quite a bit of follow-up questions we're already getting in regards to cybersecurity and how to kind of break through there. So I can't wait to dive into that in our Q&A session. So, but again, for everyone who's attending, please ask your questions. I know we'll have a ton of them, and they're really excited to answer our panelists. So, so thank you all for sharing a little bit about that. That's the kind of information that's hard to come across just learning about the state of the industry, and hearing it directly from you guys is I think what our attendees are so excited about. And as I mentioned, the phrase in-demand skills, which I feel like everyone hears that all the time. But everyone here they're here because they understand the importance of having value and providing those in-demand skills to the corporations that you guys are working for. So I guess I wanted to ask you guys, what specific skills do you need to work in this field? Maybe there's a spectrum that you can lay it out on us for us, and what should people aspire to learn in those respective fields? So let's go back over to Gaurav. I haven't heard from you in a little while. What's it like for you at eBay? What are some of the in-demand skills for those data professionals?
Absolutely. I think this is an evolving field when it comes to data. And generally speaking, the language in which you do things is agnostic of the company, the organization you're working on, right? So something that at Spotify, or generally speaking in my previous experience, something that you would see as a data analyst or a data professional working regularly with would be analyzing, or at least being able to parse through data of huge volumes, or as we in the jargon terms like to call it big data, right? And be able to kind of parse through that. And some of the key things that you would want to know is like knowing SQL. And that's basically a way to interact with this massive data sets that you have available, right? And as you kind of go through the spectrum of expertise, you start thinking about not just being able to read these pieces of information, but how can you make changes to it, right? How can you analyze it a bit more? You can do a lot of analysis within SQL itself, but as you kind of increase your proficiency level, you start asking more questions, which is more predictive side of things. And that's where the realms of data science kind of starts kicking in. And that's where you would see people starting to use R or Python from a very foundational level, right? That being said, no one just simply uses one particular language. There's a lot of different stacks out there that are available for you to basically use. Organizations don't rely on just a database and someone to say like just write SQL on it, because you have enterprise softwares out there that basically do that, right? So generally speaking, at an organization, you would be working on one of the cloud providers, more or less like thinking in the realms of Amazon, Google, or Microsoft to say so. And from a data point of view, you would be probably using one of their data warehouses or data sets such as Redshift, BigQuery, so on and so forth, right? And on top of this is the baseline to say, so these are table stakes for you to get started with. That's where the set of tools that are built up on top of that, think of modern data stack, all the extract and transformation load things, DBT, all these kind of things start piling up again and again, right? So from a foundational perspective, if you're new to the field and if you want to know what is it that everyone uses in my organization, the most solid and the most easiest answer that you can get is SQL and Python from a data point of view, right? Everything else that you hear people talking about, oh, this organization is using DBT, this organization is using, I don't know, Databricks or so on and so forth, is just a flavor of how you can use data, how you can work with data on top of these foundational language. So anyone who is thinking that I want to become a data engineer, data analyst, data scientist, these are the stacks to kind of go for. And this is what we use across all organizations. Yeah.
Amazing. And kind of feeding off that, I want to go over to you, Zohan, just giving that software is obviously a very technical field. So what are some of those in-demand skills you look for over at Spotify, and I guess just in your general field and industry?
Oh, so yeah, at eBay, like we use Marco.js. Sorry.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I meant eBay. I was looking at Spotify and I meant eBay.
No worries, all good. I'd love to explore that Spotify job later on, maybe. But jokes apart, like at eBay, we use Marco.js, which is like based off of JavaScript. But like in terms of like an entry-level person, I would just focus on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Once you know them and get thorough with that, you think of more of like how do I render my code quicker and stuff like that. That's where like a ton of different frameworks like come into place, and how you organize your code and stuff like that. So like React is one of the top used like frameworks that you can probably try learning if you're new, after you learn like obviously JavaScript and then HTML and CSS, because those are like the core, like the base foundation of your like of your career. But as like Gaurav mentioned, like every different company would use a different framework or different language that they're sort of that they have like built, or their legacy code is built into. But again, like if you learn JavaScript, like I guess you can easily catch on into any other framework, or like learn any other language like easily, because at the end it's all just logic. How you think is what determines like how well you write your code. So it doesn't matter like where you start off. It is how better you apply the logic. So basically, yeah, summarizing it, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are like the fundamental base if you're starting off.
Amazing. And kind of learning one, you can use your logic from one to learn others. Is that what you're kind of saying there as well?
Yes, so if you learn JavaScript, like there's like tons of different frameworks based off of JavaScript, Angular, there's like React and different other uh, frameworks that you can just use based off JavaScript. But yeah, it's most part of like how you think, how you organize your code is more important than what language you're working on.
Awesome. And Matthew, I know you mentioned before that you're maybe not as technical as Gaurav and so on here. So I guess for you, kind of in that hiring state, what's kind of some in-demand skills you look for, when searching for the greatest and latest cybersecurity professional?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a really funny contrast. So like, okay, here I come. So in my previous role, actually, before my current privacy and AI legal gig, I was managing our global cybersecurity policy team. And I was obviously on the hiring team for that because I had a team of reports. And it's going to sound maybe a little cliche, but to be completely honest, the main criteria was, intellectual curiosity, right? That was really what we were looking for. I think we're interestingly kind of moving past the time of like the formal 4-year degree education. There's so many other places to kind of get that. I think it's really about, do you have the skills and can you contribute from day one? And it starts with pure, genuine intellectual curiosity. And I think that a misconception is intellectual curiosity means, hey, I'm curious about cybersecurity, and that's kind of it. In reality, intellectual curiosity is the question of, are you curious about something and what have you done about it? Right. So take cybersecurity, for instance. Okay, yeah, I was really interested in cybersecurity. I don't have an undergrad or master's in cybersecurity, but I, let's say, found this cool boot camp through Brainstation and I learned a little bit about it. I understand these different sort of concepts like, identity and access management. I understand, the CIA triad. I've learned all these really core concepts so I can kind of speak that language. In addition, we had this cool project at the end that I can tell you about where I walked through a company and assessed their security posture and was able to identify areas for improvement. That's extreme value, right? Like that's something that's really cool. And it shows me that you really want to talk about this. You're really interested in learning more about it. You're really, my questions are always, okay, cool. So what are you reading currently? Or, what are some breaches that you've heard about recently? What do you think companies could have done better? And those are questions I think that anyone should be able to answer, but it really starts with, are you really passionate about this space sincerely? And again, sort of what are you doing about it? So I think soft skills are kind of underrated in this space, but they go a long way. So I think if you're a team player and you're someone who's cool to be around and you're someone who's willing to learn new stuff and adapt to an ever-changing landscape, there's a lot of value in that. And the extent to which you can demonstrate that tangibly, that'll obviously put you over.
Yeah, and I know, Gaurav, you raise your hand, and I want to make the point that I feel like in the tech space especially, there's obviously those hard skills you need to a certain extent, but it's just as important to have those soft skills as well. So Gaurav, do you have anything to kind of add there?
Yeah, just want to double down on what Matthew said, because tech jobs or the entry to tech role might feel for someone who is new that you need to be an absolute 9 out of 10 to be able to kind of even consider yourself for a tech role. That's a myth. That's not true, number one, right? Because a lot of things that we learn is on the job experience, and you can't just simply say that because you know everything about any particular stack, therefore you are going to fit very well into one thing, right? And as you said, I'll double down on that part, that a lot of your role, if you're really good at one language, that alone is not going to make you successful at your role. How do you work through it? How do you communicate? How do you basically work with people and understand what are the priorities of the place you're going to work is also equally important, if not more at times, right? So it's very easy at times to upskill yourself in these tech languages or tech stack point of view, or change to a new tech stack at times. But understanding the context about why we do this, generally speaking, is very important. And I think that's far more valuable at times as well. Yeah. So I thought something that Matthew said was really, really nice about how curious are you to learn the things or to understand or be in the space. That's very important, I would say.
I think that kind of goes into the next set of questions I have here, which is transitioning into that role in tech and, how to best stand out when applying for a specific role. So my next question is, how can someone best stand out when applying for a role in your respective fields? So I think, let's go with Zohan here first. It's, I haven't heard your voice in a little while, and I'm curious to hear from you about, how to best stand out in the software engineering space.
I would just say first, yeah, you have to learn them. So start off with mastering your skills, practice on a daily basis. Like there's Lead Code that is one of the best resources out there. You can practice a lot of interview questions, build your resume properly, like have enough projects on hand, like where you can, if you have no experience on the job, then yeah, probably projects are your best bet that recruiters will, or the hiring manager would be looking at, if it's an entry level role. So yeah, I mean, like your resume, like how good are you tailoring it based off of that job? So yeah, I know it's a lot of work, like to customize your resume for each job, but I mean, like it's worth it. Like if you apply at 1,000 jobs, but your resume is the same for those 1,000 jobs versus you apply for 200 different jobs and it's like tailored to all those jobs, your chances of getting hired are more in those 200 applications that you're making, right? So that's like one of things that I would say. Plus, yeah, and practice, a lot of practice that will make you stand out of in the interview.
And I know that I mentioned we'll do questions at the end, but I think this one is so important. I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about right now too. How important is a portfolio when trying to land a job in software engineering?
So yeah, it is like if you're trying to land a job, then yeah, that's the topmost priority you need to have, like your portfolio, plus they also check like what you've learned. So like because I remember like I learned React and like Node.js at Brainstation back in 2020. So like that was like one of the most in-demand skills, and that's what landed me like sort of, a job like in the first place because like they were using React. They already had a code base in React because that was like one of the in-demand languages, and that's where your portfolio begins. Like you make a project in React and that's what they want. They see similarities in your project versus what they've got going on in their website, and that's where like you get your opportunity. So your portfolio is very important.
Definitely. And I hear a lot too that it's important to, maybe it's not the quantity of amount things in your portfolio, but the quality of what is in your portfolio. If it's one or two huge projects that you spend a lot of time on, might be better than having a lot of small projects.
Right. If you talked about my projects, like I just had one big project, like a complete website, like that was an e-commerce one. I had a ton of different features in it rather than like having built small different projects, like a single page project versus like a single page application that has multiple pages built in it and a ton of different functionalities is what would stand out rather than 10 different projects, because no one would have that amount of time to go through that 10 different projects. But if one project stands out and you have that on your resume, then that'll help a lot.
That's great. Thank you. Gaurav, let's go up to you. So how can someone best stand out when applying for a role in data engineering manager at Spotify in particular? What do you look for on your team when someone's applying?
Yeah, I think Zahan mentioned around the basics, like the table stakes around knowing the basics of the SQL and knowing basically the stack, practicing around it, because that's absolutely needed. As I say, Rome was not built in a day, and therefore you can't just simply think that you would straight away transition into a new role. So you need to practice, you need to educate yourself about what's happening in the industry. And as I mentioned, there are some basic things that will get you quite far ahead with basically when you want to transition, right? The other thing that I think is very important is, be it if you're transitioning from a non-technical role to a technical role, let's say to a data role, you will go into understanding what these languages are, what these things are. But the fundamental thing that I look for when I think about when someone is transitioning is how well do you understand the data that you have, right? Like, how do you think through it? Because a lot of times you would have a data set of like, I don't know, 20 terabytes or petabytes of data, but that doesn't mean anything unless you know what to do with it, right? And that is very little part of that is what learning a language will teach you. You would know how to create some average or whatnot of a particular function, but why do you create that is the question, is the curiosity, I would say, is very important. So when you transition from a non-technical role or from a technical role to another technical role, or you're switching jobs to a different industry altogether, think about what are the key burning problems that people are trying to solve there, right? And how can you uh, relate to that problem? Like I switched from working in an e-commerce field to a music field, and in between I was working for an intellectual property kind of role as well. And it was very much about like, how do you see the problems that this organization has, and how can you leverage data to solve those problems? The same things that you have learned can be applied in all these three different streams, but how do you understand the business that you're going to go with, that you're going to work with, is this very, very important, right? And so once you have the baseline of practice, as Zohan was also mentioning, of like the relevancy of the skills that you need to be able to perform these basic operations, the next bit that I look for in candidates when I'm interviewing or when I'm thinking about moving to a different role is, how well do I relate to this industry? What are the key burning challenges that they are trying to solve? And how can I, as an individual, come in and make a difference, right? If that's not, and if I don't get excited, or if I don't get an answer to that question, or if I don't see someone who is interviewing has a good answer to that question, that gives me a sign that they're probably not in the right place to be right now, right? So that's what I would advise for someone who is transitioning to any industry, from a non-technical role to a technical, or technical to technical. Think about these once you have the basic understanding of what are the baseline technical skills that you would need. Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely, my next question is actually about transitioning into, into the tech space. So hold your thoughts there. I'm going to come back to you right away. But before that, I think it's super important to hear from you, Matthew, about some of the best ways to stand out when applying for a role in that cybersecurity and artificial intelligence field that you're currently in.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think I kind of jumped the gun and answered a little bit of that already, which is really just kind of demonstrating that intellectual curiosity. But I think just to kind of go off of the great responses so far, I think, we're talking about portfolios and sort of the value of portfolios as well. I think when we think about portfolios, sometimes we're thinking about, hey, like, can you show me an app that you developed or something a little bit more sort of technical, but it does apply to non-technical as well, right? You would love to have some kind of sort of tangible demonstration of your capability that ultimately is always going to help you. It could be something like a paper that you published, or it can be like a personal project that you've worked on to sort of improve the policy drafting process or make research sort of more manageable, things that you can kind of speak to that sort of, again, demonstrate that these are things that I've thought about, these are problems that I've sort of solved for. And if you can apply that to the company that you're interviewing with, even better, like, hey, I noticed in your privacy policy, here's something, or what have you. That being said, I would also say that probably requires a little bit more finesse, and you don't want to be overly outspoken because you could accidentally step on toes, or you can be offering free labor. But I think, one thing that is becoming increasingly common is that in some interviews, especially technically, but also now non-technically, I think interviewers are like, hey, by the way, can you kind of put together this work product for us, right? And because, again, you want sort of that tangible demonstration of capability. I usually don't participate in that because it's like, no, I'm not going to do like your work for you. But I think that, if you can kind of get ahead of that and kind of just point to something tangible and say like, hey, this is something I've done, that's great. I think the other thing too is going off of sort of the soft skills thread, being authentic is really important when you're interviewing and when you're talking to hiring managers, because you may not know it. You may think like you're really polished and you memorize all these responses and like all this other stuff, but if you're not being genuine, we can tell better than you think. And that can lead to a lot of pitfalls, right? Especially if your strategy is to just throw out a bunch of buzzwords because you've heard them and you think that they're relevant. You might come across that hiring manager who's going to really dig deep on some of those buzzwords and really test your proficiency in them. And then that may lead to some unsavory discoveries in the interview, right? So I think just being honest and upfront Obviously, there's always going to be like a little bit of puffery because you are trying to be sort of the best candidate. But I think just really being yourself will also kind of determine whether or not there's a good sort of match, again, from sort of that soft skill perspective. Because, you know, if you can't be yourself, and if for whatever reason that kind of counts against you, that's also a really good indicator that maybe that's just like not a really good environment for you either. And I think something that candidates don't really think about is that even for entry level roles, like it's okay to be a little self-selective, right? It's okay for you to say, hey, I don't really like the vibe here. I don't think this is going to work because, you know, you might tell yourself, oh, well, you know, okay, I just have to be here for a year or two. Why do that? Why be there for those miserable like couple of years? You know, just, but yeah, so I think being authentic and really thinking about how to sort of demonstrate and speak to your passion, your interests will really help you stand out.
Yeah, and I know Zohan has something to add here, but I think when you said authenticity and being genuine, even beyond the interviewing process, you are ultimately spending 40 to 50 hours a week with this person, and you need to make sure that you're sharing interests. You're both passionate about the field you're working in. You're passionate about the projects you're working on. You know, you have to be that genuine, authentic self as well. I think that's important to building that team culture that we stress so much, and you know, the work-life culture these days. So Zohan, I want to make sure that you add your 2 cents there. I know you were excited to say.
Yeah, it was just like reiterating the point of being authentic, because like I remember like while I was interviewing for eBay, like there was like a skill set that said SQL. I had just done basic like basic writing in SQL. I didn't know most of the stuff. So I was just like, I just pinged the HR manager and said like, hey, because I was approached up front for this role and I had SQL in my resume, but I wasn't like an expert in that. So I was like, hey, if it requires like ton of SQL writing, then I'm not going to be like comfortable doing that. But I'm for sure like willing to learn. So if that's where you're like you're okay with that, then I would for sure like love to do that. And they like that honesty, and then they trained me on it. So I would just say like, yeah, being honest, if the company is willing to like, invest into you, then they will for sure like go ahead with that point.
Awesome. I know I mentioned that. I know I mentioned Gaurav moving into more of the transitioning questions, but I think I'm going to go just dive right into the Q&A, because the first question I'm seeing is about transitioning into a career in technology. So I will head up to you first, Gaurav, and speaking to Gaurav's advice on how to stand out when transitioning to a new position, how do you identify the problems a certain industry is trying to solve? So I guess, I don't know, do you have any insight there, or just about any advice in transitioning from maybe, like you said, that non-technical role into more of that technical role?
Yeah. I think that's a very good question, by the way, because I wish I had a one-liner to answer that question, but there is no one-liner, sadly. But generally speaking, if I had to list down this on a step-by-step basis on what you would do, I think first things first, when you're moving into tech, identify the area which you're passionate about, be it data, software engineering, cybersecurity, AI, whichever field that you feel that this is an area where you're curious. Doesn't mean you know everything about it. It just means where you're curious about, right? And then thanks to technology and thanks to internet, we have so much resources out there across what are the key players in that particular industry and what are they trying to work towards, right? Taking an example, when you talk about e-commerce, it's basically a business of buying and selling, right? Like the question is, how can we ensure that people buy more versus we sell more versus people get the most value for their money and things like that? So these are some of the age-old questions that people have been trying to solve through data, through software engineering, conversion rate optimizations, SEO, things like that, right? So there's a lot of things that you can get into when you just focus on one particular domain, right? And the way to do it is to kind of read more, understand what are the different resources out there. So LinkedIn, for example, is a pretty good place to kind of get started with, connect with people, build a community. And often I've been in this industry for about 12 years now, and often some days I come across someone who's sharing a piece of nugget that I genuinely did not know about, and I'm genuinely happy that I'm aware of this now, right? So there will be a lot of tech words, buzzwords that will come up, and you probably wouldn't know about it, and that is fine. There is no problem there, right? Because that's something that you can learn and get better at it, right? But at the same time, you need to understand what is the thing that you're curious about. And every time you find an area which you're curious about, I can say with a fairly certain degree of confidence that if you reach out to people on LinkedIn alone, they'll be more than happy to have a discussion, just like we are having all of this together right now, right? So those kind of things are where I would say for someone who is transitioning from a non-technical to a technical side of things, find out the niche that you think that you're fascinated, that you're excited about. Doesn't mean that you have to be good at it. You can always switch, you can always try new things. No one's stopping you from there, right? But at the same time, be very hungry about the kind of things that everyone is working on. Speak to them. If people have problems, they'd be more than happy to share that problem in the hope that you might have a solution for them. So use that to your advantage. And basically, that's how you would learn more about the industry, about the area that you're getting into it, and also the technical challenges that people are facing. Maybe you don't need to look at the entire spectrum of technology within data, for example. You just need to focus on one specific niche that solves such a big problem that you became an expert on that, and that's all that you needed in the first place, right? So that's what I would advise, to kind of keep an open mind to what you're getting into and read more, learn, check out the resources out there. I think Brainstation has a pretty good courses as well that I've looked into, like from a data science perspective and things that you can do. So those are really good places to be in to kind of explore and basically get into it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And kind of within that realm, moving on to you, Matthew, we have a question for you. I am new to artificial intelligence. What do you think is a good start for learning how to work with AI in the tech industry?
Yeah, so I'm not a paid spokesperson for Brainstation, so I'm not going to be like, sign up for our AI, but I do teach AI at Brainstation as well. And I can tell you that, the approach there is really helpful. So I'm not going to get into anything proprietary, but I will say as a general outline to think about, understanding just, to Gaurav's point, right? All the information out there to learn the basics are there for you and they're free. So if you want to YouTube it, if you want to Google it, if you just want to understand, what are the different model types, how generally do they work? Again, I'm the least technical person, but I can at least tell you sort of generally, broadly speaking, conceptually, how these models are working sort of behind the hood. Understand sort of what are the biggest challenges, and you can benchmark and you can look in companies that you probably interact with today. So if you're using ChatGPT, if you're using Midjourney, whatever, take a look at the news filter on Google and just Google those companies and see what are people saying about them in the media? Are they getting into legal trouble, for instance? And what are the reasons for that, right? And so again, to Gaurav's point, which I think is a really good one, is if you can, because I'm talking about sort of demonstrating a capability in a tangible way. If you can think about how to solve big problems, that'll also be a tremendous value add from day one. So if you see that, okay, within AI, I know that one of the biggest challenges is sort of transparency. Okay, how can AI developers kind of get around that or work towards making sure that they have the right infrastructure? What have some of these other companies lacked, and what can I bring to sort of new companies that I want to work in? That's really solid. And then also just messing around with the technology and understanding prompt engineering, seeing what works for you, seeing what doesn't. There's a really funny sort of, it's not funny, but there's a really interesting rise in prompt engineering gigs out there. I saw one on LinkedIn today for $100,000 a year salary for someone who can write really good prompts in ChatGPT, and that's awesome. So, that's a really cool skill. But prompt engineering is also fascinating because from a security standpoint, it's also the main interaction point between the user and the technology. And we're seeing a number of issues from a security perspective, around, I think one of the funnier ones was if you get ChatGPT, and they've obviously patched this, but if you got ChatGPT to keep on saying the word poem over and over and over again, I think it would disclose sensitive user data, right? Why? Why is that happening? How is that happening? And how do we make sure that we're kind of solving for those issues going forward? Or, making sure that just companies have the right hygiene to make sure that they're not collecting data that they shouldn't be about users or things like that. So again, just doing your sort of research and seeing what's going on out there. These AI companies are currently facing these problems in real time. So just keep abreast of what those problems are and think about how you'd solve them if you were kind of advising them. And I think that that's a really good first step.
Absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. To someone who is like you is not very technical. That makes sense to me. So I appreciate that. And Zohan, we have a lot of questions obviously coming in for software engineering. I know you, and I think these questions are perfect for you as well, because you just mentioned that you took the boot camp in 2020. So it sounds like within the last 4 years, you kind of had to go through the job process of, software engineering, trying to get your foot in the door here. So we have a few questions on just how to stand out when applying to entry-level roles. Do you have suggestions on what to emphasize on your resume to get through that initial interview or phone screen? Do you have anything also another question was, what differentiates a student project versus a professional project on your portfolio? Do you have any advice on either of those?
So yeah, for the first question was, I guess I already answered that based off like building a portfolio and then customizing your resume and then what you've learned, like displaying it like in terms of a project, would be the best sort of like display that you could give an HR or like and a hiring manager, like what you're capable of doing. Coming down to like projects, like personal versus professional, I would just say like even if your personal project, like where like I would say my personal project was based off of what my capstone project at Brainstation was. So like the final project I built off of that, like furthermore, because 2 weeks obviously isn't enough to build like an entire website. But yeah, I would just say like if you have a personal project that has a lot of capability of, going big, then for sure, like go with that. Like I'm not sure about like professional sort of like project. If you're like interested in that, then yeah, for sure, go ahead. Like for example, like if you're like interested or you have a side gig, for example, you do a lot of different fixing jobs, like probably you know a lot of things about like electricity and like cables and stuff like that, then probably yeah, you can display your own website and advertise yourself, and then show that as part of your project if you're applying for a role. Uh, but yeah, that would be my bit. Like whatever you're doing, just think how useful it is and how innovative you are doing, other than like just creating an Amazon replica, which like 100 other people would be capable of doing it by just watching a YouTube video. But like just make sure that you're adding some uniqueness to your project.
And as that came in, I know this may be a good question to feed. I know Gaurav, you want to answer some of this too, and this is a good follow up to this question too, and how to build up that confidence when interviewing as well. So I'm going to pass over to you, Gaurav, and if you have anything else to add there as far as confidence goes, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this ties into the personal versus professional as well, because the key thing I see a lot of, I've conducted hundreds of interviews over the time, and I think personal projects are great, but what separates them and how do you differentiate between them is basically how do you make a simple problem production ready? Think about that. Think about if you had a project which does a website, which does something, would it survive in the wild? And if no, then that's the difference between a personal and a professional project, right? And a lot of times, a lot of organizations are doing very simple thing, but the reason why they're doing it so well is because they're able to do the same thing reliably again and again and again. So when you're building a personal project, think about, would this survive in the wild? Should I need to include things like logging, error handling, things like that, right? Those are the kind of things that a lot of times people don't think about. And that's what differentiates when I'm interviewing someone and that comes across like, oh, someone has built up a project which also not only does something, but also handles issues that are not expected, right? That's where you separate yourself. And that's where you show that you have thought this through about what this could work. Because when you start a job, you would not be just expected to build a new, unique, shiny feature all the time. A lot of times it would be, how do you make sure that this works and this handles that? If one person is using this product, what about 1 million people? If they're simultaneously using this product, will it hold true or not? And that's the kind of difference that makes you think about, that's the difference in my opinion between personal and professional. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. And Matthew, I think just overall, I'm getting a ton of questions about just how to break into the cybersecurity field. I think it's kind of that shiny new thing in the tech field that everyone's really excited about. Do you have any advice on how to kind of kick the door open there and get into the field?
Yeah, absolutely. But man, I just want to say, Gaurav, really good point. Just like, because I'm thinking about it, and it's such a good point that I think when we approach new roles and projects, like we're thinking, oh man, we got to really innovate. We really have to, but that reliability and having people who can stay consistent and like do sort of the, the doc review, the policy review, like just the daily insta out. If you can do that really well, it leads to so much more later. So I just wanted to really second that. But anyways, yes. So tapping into cybersecurity. Yeah, I mean, again, I think I like it sounds maybe not as helpful, but I really genuinely mean it when I tell you that, kind of going out there and exposing yourself to it, steeping yourself in it. So that means like think about really, again, free resources out there or your favorite publications, right? Maybe it's Wired Magazine or TechCrunch or what have you. Set up a little subscription like dingy thing so that every morning I have the anxiety of waking up to like 20 emails until I realize that like 15 of those emails are just newsletters that I subscribe to that are keeping me in the know of sort of like what's going on. So I think the more conversationally proficient you are in the space, the better. And I think that the more you learn about it and the more exposure you get to it, the more it helps funnel you into the area that you may be interested in. Because here's the thing, cybersecurity is super cool, but like I said, there is policy, governance, risk, there is compliance, there is training, there is project management, there is pen testing. There is so many different flavors of cybersecurity out there. And I think that most of you probably haven't even scratched the surface of what cybersecurity is. So the first step is really thinking about what is it that you actually want to do in cybersecurity, right? What is it that you want to contribute to? And I think from there, you can start to narrow down the opportunities and sort of the trainings and what you have to do. But I would say the first step really is looking within yourself and helping yourself by like, seeing again, sort of what's happening out in the world. How do I want to do this? Like where am I going to see myself like adding the most value and the most impact? And remember that these types of jobs are ones where you can hop around. So you start in project management, and in the background, maybe you pick up some technical skills and eventually you go into pen testing. The beauty of cybersecurity is that it's such a community of like-minded people where, if you love the space enough and you demonstrated genuine desire to go move into another area completely, you can, right? I mean, within IBM, I can tell you it happens all the time where people go from a role that you would never expect to something completely different because they took the time to get the right mentorship, to kind of skill up on their own, to find those opportunities. So just think about what it is you want to do and then think about how best to go forward and sort of like demonstrating that, right? Whether again, it's sort of taking, I know, again, this is going to sound not great as if like I'm telling you to, but really genuinely Brainstation is cool because if I spoke to someone who came out of Brainstation who told me that these are the things that I worked on and these are the things that I can talk to you about, and they're using sort of these keywords and they understand what they mean, that's awesome. And then to Gaurav's point as well, right, you demonstrate that and then we'll teach you all the rest of the stuff, right? We'll supplement the rest as you kind of like go along. So just have that passion, have that interest, demonstrate it, think about what you want to do, and then take those first couple of steps.
I have one last question, and this might be a little bit of a stumper. So if you guys don't have anything, no problem. If you do, let me know. What is the greatest piece of advice you've received in your career journey?
I can go. I'll just say, don't look at those big numbers in terms of salaries. Like this company offers 200K salary, and the other one, and currently you are sitting at 120. Is that jump worth the stress that the job that brings out to you? Like, is it what you're really interested in, or you're just going in there for the big paycheck? If you're not interested in it, then probably 6 months down the road you'll just quit, because trust me, like the money that comes in is like good for the time being, but then if you're not well minded in your if you're not in the right mindset in your personal life, if it affects you, it's not just worth it. If you're interested in it, for sure, like explore every single bit that's out there. But yeah, just don't consider the money. If you're in technology just for the money, you'll not survive for long.
It's a great point.
I agree. I think that's a pretty cool point to add on. And one thing that I would say is always remember the first step is the hardest. And a lot of times things might seem very daunting because they have very weird terminology, very jargony words associated with that, so on and so forth. They're really not as hard as it thinks. So it was thought about by humans, and they had to think about it in some way or other. They think the same way that everyone thinks similarly. It's just the way they do it can be different. So sometimes, or like looking into my experiences, when I started out with some stuff, it seemed very, the challenge seemed massive, right? But you do 2 days with it and you realize that, okay, it's not that hard. It's basically just different ways of saying things. So the first step is always the hardest, and you have to be prepared for that. And the moment you endure through that first few steps is where magic happens, because 90% of the people don't go past the first or second step. So if you want to make that difference, or if you want to be in an area to basically excel and do good at it, remember that the first few steps are gonna suck really bad. It's what happens, the growth happens after that, and that's where the beauty lies of all things that you do. Yeah, so that's one piece of advice that I always take with me. Yeah.
Amazing. Matthew, anything to add?
That's tough because I agree with those were both really well said. I think the only thing I'll add is maybe if you can't find a door, just build one and break it down yourself, right? So I think like you can create your own portfolio today. You can build something today. You can, at your current job, even if it's something that's totally unrelated to what you do, you can raise your hand and take on a stretch assignment or a shadow, or get that exposure, create your own internships, create your own experiences. So don't wait for the perfect opportunity to kind of come along. Just make it.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. This is an incredible panel. I learned so much, and I know that everyone who attended today has as well. So we really appreciate it. Before we go, I just want to quickly mention some of those boot camps that we talked about today. If you have any questions or you want to learn a little bit more, again, go ahead and book a call with one of the learning advisors on the right hand of your screen. They will be able to answer any questions you may have. So again, April 23rd. So just a couple weeks away, but we have some great opportunities. And of course, we have part-time, we have full-time, there's online, there's in-campus, there's so many opportunities for you guys to really, if you want to break into the boot camp field and break into the field through a boot camp, there's a ton of opportunities there that we want to make sure is best for your time and your flexibility as well. So those are your boot camps that we have. And then in addition to that, some of the courses maybe Matthew has mentioned in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, in addition to data science and data analytics, those are starting in April, which is only a few days away. So again, these take anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to complete. We have them on weekdays, we have them on weekends. Again, we want to make sure that it's beneficial for your time. So if any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to a learning advisor. And just overall, we really appreciate you all being here and hanging out with us for the past hour. If you enjoy these events, we do offer them every week. So next week, we will be highlighting UX design, digital marketing, and product management. But 1 week after that, and 2 Tuesdays, we have a new set of panelists. We wish we can have the 3 of you every week, but we want to learn from some new people as well. And we'll be highlighting that data, cybersecurity, and software engineering on April 9th. And then in addition to that, if you're interested in a boot camp, but you're not really sure if it's for you, we have our online intro day happening on April 13th. And that's kind of like trying out a boot camp for a day. And we have that for software engineering, data, UX design, and cybersecurity as well. So again, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate the time. Gaurav, Matthew, Zohan, it's been amazing being able to chat with you guys for the last hour. I really enjoyed it. So hope to hear from you guys soon. And please, we can't wait to have you back at some point. So again, thank you so much and have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you may be.
Likewise, thank you very
Bye,
much.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.